For decades, Africa was treated as a chessboard, its resources, politics, and even its future decided in offices thousands of miles away. But something historic has happened. In late 2024, a quiet series of meetings across Addis Ababa, Ouagadougou, Abuja, and Johannesburg sent shockwaves through Washington. Leaders who once waited for Western approval are now shaking hands with new partners from the East and the global South. The cameras didn't show a military coup or a new war. They captured something far more dangerous to the old order. African nations acting on their own terms. The United States, once the referee of global politics, suddenly found itself watching from the sidelines. Think tanks in Washington are calling it the most dramatic geopolitical realignment since the Cold War. Why? Because Africa, home to the fastest growing populations, vast mineral wealth, and new digital markets, has stopped asking permission. Across newsrooms in the West, one question echoes. When did we lose Africa? It wasn't one single day. It was years of unmet promises, of aid wrapped in conditions, of loans that chained rather than freed. Now, a new generation, embodied by leaders like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré, Ethiopia's Abiy Ahmed, and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, is writing a different story. They speak of sovereignty, trade in local currencies, and continental self-reliance. And for Washington, this isn't just political theater. It's a trillion-dollar loss of influence. Africa controls more than 30% of the world's mineral wealth, from the cobalt fueling electric vehicles to the uranium that powers modern energy systems. Control over these resources defines the future. The U.S. knows this. So does China. So does India. Yet, as Western firms hesitate under sanctions and political red tape, African nations are signing new deals with BRICS partners, fast, transparent, and mutually beneficial. In Washington, analysts stare at the data, trade flows shifting eastward, military bases shrinking, and diplomatic missions growing colder. The old era of lectures, loans, and leverage is ending. And this is the moment that shocked Washington. To understand the collapse of U.S. influence, we have to look back to the early 2000s. America's Africa policy was built on two pillars: aid and security. Aid, to win hearts; security, to win loyalty. Programs like PEPFAR saved lives, but they also came with soft power expectations. African governments were expected to align with U.S. votes at the UN, grant resource concessions, or allow military training missions. For a while, it worked. Then came China. Beijing didn't send troops. It sent cranes, engineers, and no-strings loans. By 2020, China had built over 6,000 infrastructure projects across Africa, railways, ports, energy grids, worth more than $400 billion. Each project quietly shifted influence away from Washington. Meanwhile, Washington's own policies began to backfire. When African nations opposed Western sanctions on Russia, U.S. officials threatened to cut aid. The result? More resentment. In the Sahel, the U.S. and France launched counter-terror operations meant to stabilize the region. Instead, local populations saw little improvement, poverty remained, and foreign troops overstayed. By 2023, coups swept Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Their leaders expelled French forces and suspended ties with Western defense pacts. In Washington, policymakers were stunned. The Pentagon warned that losing the Sahel meant losing access to critical uranium and lithium fields. Yet, the people of those nations cheered, finally free from what they saw as external control. The United States underestimated the power of dignity, and dignity cannot be bought with foreign aid. They began trading in gold-backed local currencies, not the U.S. dollar. Elsewhere, Ethiopia completed the Grand Renaissance Dam, powering regional grids and symbolizing African engineering independence. Kenya and South Africa invested heavily in green technology and digital finance, attracting billions from the Gulf, India, and China. By 2025, trade between Africa and BRICS nations surpassed $500 billion, overtaking total U.S. Africa trade for the first time. That single milestone made headlines. Africa turns east. New institutions followed. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPSS, allows direct currency transactions, no dollar conversion needed. That change alone threatened the dollar's long-standing dominance across the continent. At the same time, African sovereign wealth funds, from Nigeria, Angola, and Botswana, are pooling billions into local industrial projects instead of exporting raw minerals. Cobalt, lithium, and gold are now being processed in country. The message is clear. Africa is tired of exporting wealth and importing poverty. In Washington, it's watching as contracts once guaranteed to U.S. firms are signed by Indian, Russian, or Emirati investors. Even longtime allies like Kenya and Egypt are diversifying defense deals, buying drones and energy systems from China and Turkey. The White House can no longer call the shots in African capitals, and that's the shock reverberating through the global system. When power shifts, the world feels it. Africa's assertion of independence isn't just regional. It's rewriting international economics. The International Monetary Fund warns that the rise of new trade currencies could restructure global liquidity. In plain terms, if Africa stops using the dollar for trade, the dollar weakens. In Washington, think tanks urge a re-engagement strategy, but even diplomats admit it's too late to reset the clock. African leaders no longer seek validation. They want fair partnerships. At the 2025 BRICS Summit, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Nigeria spoke with one voice. Africa will no longer be the supplier of the world. It will be the engine of the world. That statement marked a turning point. The applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Across the Atlantic, the reaction was uneasy. American media ran urgent headlines. Washington caught off guard by African bloc. Dollar faces new challenge from global south. Behind closed doors, officials discussed sanctions, incentives, and new envoys. But for many Africans, those efforts sounded like déjà vu. The younger generation, connected, educated, and proud, sees through the rhetoric. They want innovation, not intervention. And this generation is now the largest voting bloc on the continent. As we look ahead, one truth stands out. The 21st century will be shaped not by who controls Africa, but by how Africa controls its own destiny. The U.S. has not just lost influence, it has lost narrative power. The image of a single global leader has faded into a multipolar mosaic, where every region, every culture, every currency matters. This is the world that shocked Washington, a world where Africa finally speaks for itself.
Welcome to African Spotlight 24, your premier source for news and current affairs from across the continent. We're glad you're here. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe, like, and turn on notification to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis. Your support helps us reach more people. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information and is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. African Spotlight 24 does not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our goal is to deliver thoughtful insights, highlight local voices, and encourage informed conversations throughout Africa.